Men of Bone by David Penny. Digitally narrated using the voice of William Birch. Chapter 1. Thomas Berrington had avoided much in the way of trouble for several years, so it came as a surprise how easily it found him again on his return to England. Not that it was his fight when it came. Such had never concerned him in the past, but the last few years his mind had changed on the matter. He had seen too much of death and bloodshed to welcome more. When the trouble came, the circumstances were mundane. Thomas needed a haircut and a shave, nothing more. He had arrived in England 3 days before, grateful that the late September weather had been kinder than feared. The waters between northern France and southern England seemed rough enough, but the crew only laughed when he commented on it. They told him to come try it in November or December. A good southwesterly had brought the small Creer from Fécamp to Southampton in only 2 days. Once the Creer was safely tied up, Thomas stood on a narrow gangplank and stared at the cobbled dock, a strange reluctance filling him. One step and he would stand on England for the first time in 47 years. He feared that once that step was taken, he might never return to where he had come from. This was meant to be an assignment of limited duration, but so had been his leaving of England at the age of 13. "Move on, sir," said a voice from behind. "Unless you have changed your mind, but it will be the same price to take you back as it was to bring you." Thomas took the step. The world continued to turn. The sky did not fall. Though after the crossing, the cobbles beneath his feet seemed to move. He found a stable that would sell him a horse, and paid the price asked without haggling, which confused its seller no end. The ostler told Thomas the horse's name was Ferrand, but he could change it if he wished. He saw no reason to do so. It was a placid beast, which pleased him, and answered well to his touch. Thomas's mind stilled as he rode away from the bustle of the port town of Southampton. 3 days later, it grew anxious again, when he saw the smoke stain and church spires of London ahead. He reached into his jacket for a scrap of paper, and read the 2 words he had written in far-off Spain: Belle Savage. It was the name of an inn he would find if he followed the road into London from the west. He had instilled the same name into his family 2 months earlier, before leaving them to journey north on his own. He could think of no other means of them finding him, other than to seek the same lodgings and ask his whereabouts. An English nobleman had provided the name of the inn when he came to witness the grandeur that was Granada and the Palace of Alhambra. As he approached the walls of London, Thomas still had no idea if the man had intended to make a fool of him or not. So it came as a surprise to discover the Belle Savage was a large establishment consisting of 30 well-appointed rooms, together with stabling for 60 horses. It sat near the Fleet, on a wide thoroughfare named after the river, but far enough away to avoid the stink of its putrid water. The inn was 100 paces from Ludgate, which offered entrance through the city walls. Thomas handed Ferrand over to a young stable hand, and took his saddlebags inside, together with a leather satchel almost black with age, which contained some of the tools of his trade. Thomas was a physician, a surgeon trained in the best infirmaries of Moorish Spain, when it still existed, which it had not done for over 9 years. Inside, the goodwife showed him to a room and handed him a heavy iron key for the lock, with a promise it was the only one, so his belongings would be safe. Thomas dropped his saddlebags on the bed and set the leather satchel beside them. "Are you hungry, sir?" asked the goodwife. "I can send food to your room, or a fine table is set downstairs. 4 pence either way." Once more, Thomas did not know if the cost was reasonable or not, but he had no hunger. The small meals he had taken since arriving in England had not enamored him to its cuisine. "Can I ask you something?" "Ask away, but ask quick. My customers complain if I'm away too long." "Then 2 things. First, do you know if the king is in London? Second, do you know where I can get a haircut and shave?" The woman laughed. "Both simple questions to answer, sir. Yes, the king is in town. And there is a barber's shop, less than 200 paces along this road, which is where Thomas found the trouble. When he reached the shop, it was busy, and he had to wait. As he did so, he had more questions, which he directed at the man standing beside him, who was waiting his own turn. There were two barbers working, one an older man with very little in the way of hair on his own head, the second a young woman with luxuriant black tresses and a pretty face. "Tell me, sir, for I am newly returned to England after some time away, what is the fashion these days? Do men wear beards? Do you know how long the king wears his hair?" "The king?" Thomas nodded. "King Henry, I believe." "You are right in that, sir." The man looked Thomas up and down. What he saw was a man taller than most, rising to a good 6 feet. Strangely dressed, with a long blue scarf wrapped around his neck and shoulders. A face that carried a scar or two, but none recent. Hair that was too long and beard the same. You need only look around to judge the fashion for beards, sir. Few gentlemen sport them these days. As for the king's hair, I do not believe I have ever seen him. When his turn came, Thomas asked the young woman who had called him to a chair about the king. "He wears it to his chin," she said, "though it is thinning these days. And clean-shaven." "Of course." She examined Thomas. "Will you need a shave too?" She ran her fingers through his hair, but made no comment on its quantity or quality. Thomas had stripped and washed his body, including hair and beard, the night before in a river he believed was the Thames. Watching the other clients, it appeared cleanliness was not something required by either of the barbers. The woman picked up her scissors. The two blades hinged with a curved steel hoop, which required some strength to use. "How much shorter do you want it?" "I want it as short as the king wears his." "A good 4 inches then." She began to work, starting with the shave before moving on to his hair. She cut the bulk of its length off quickly, then returned to apply some measure of style to what was left. There was no mirror, so Thomas had no idea how good a job she was doing. She had used the same scissors to remove most of his beard before scraping away the rest with a sharp blade. She was almost done when she gave a gasp, and her hand jerked to inflict a small cut on Thomas's cheek. "I am sorry, sir." Thomas glanced at the door to see what had bothered her. 3 men entered the shop with a swagger, all dressed in similar clothes, with red felt caps on their heads. Several of those standing to wait their turn found themselves unwilling to wait longer and eased past the 3 to leave. One man went to the male barber and pushed him backwards against the wall. A second came to the woman and put a hand on her breast. She made no effort to push him away. Thomas did not know how much trouble there was in this and had lost the spirit to respond to such situations several years before. Even so, the assault on the young woman brought him to his feet. He wiped his face with a linen cloth. "I was not finished with my haircut," he said to the man. "And the lady would like you to release her." The man turned to look at Thomas. "You are finished now. Leave if you know what is good for you." Later Thomas would wonder why he acted as he did, but supposed it was instinct. There had been many years when he thought nothing of protecting others. A strange reluctance held him back for a moment, until the man snatched at the girl's dress and ripped it to reveal her breasts. Thomas hit the man square on the nose, feeling a satisfying crunch as bone shattered. At one time, he would have taken his life without a second thought. Now life held more value for him, the lives of both the innocent, the vulnerable, and the guilty. The man raised both hands to his face and gave a great cry. Another who had waited at the door came at Thomas.